Ryan Parker was hurt tonight, and when we asked who to call, he gave us your name, a hospital nurse said. The unfamiliar number had lit my phone at 1:17 in the morning, while I was asleep on my couch with my laptop still open on my chest. I had nearly ignored it. Then something had made me answer. "Is this Ethan Miller?" the woman had asked. "Yes." There had been a brief pause before the sentence that pulled me upright. She told me Ryan was stable, awake, and had authorized the hospital to contact me and let me visit. 20 minutes later, I pushed through the emergency room doors wearing yesterday's jeans, mismatched socks, and the first sweatshirt I'd found on my floor. The drive there was mostly missing from my memory. I remembered red lights that seemed endless, my hands gripping the steering wheel, and the same thought repeating inside my head. Ryan asked for me. At the front desk, a nurse looked up from her computer. "Ryan Parker?" I said. "I'm here for Ryan Parker." She asked my name, checked the screen, then looked at me again. "Are you family?" The question should have been easy. Ryan and I had known each other since college. 8 years of terrible birthday gifts, Sunday football, late-night diner runs, moving apartments, failed relationships, and arguments neither of us could stay angry about. I knew how he took his coffee and which song he always skipped in my car. I knew he hated tomatoes, but somehow loved tomato soup. I knew when he was pretending to be fine because the left corner of his mouth tightened whenever he lied. But family? No, I said quietly. I'm his best friend. She checked the authorization Ryan had given, then told me where to wait. He had been thrown from his bicycle when a car door opened into the bike lane on his way home from work. His injuries were not life-threatening. A mild concussion, a non-displaced fracture near his left ankle, and a deep bruise across his right shoulder. Nothing required surgery, but he would need a walking boot, short-term support from forearm crutches, rest, follow-up imaging, and physical therapy. The relief hit so hard that I had to sit down. When they finally let me see him, Ryan looked smaller than I'd ever seen him, not physically. Ryan was still 6 feet tall, still broad-shouldered, still unmistakably himself, but the hospital bed somehow stripped away the confidence he carried everywhere. His brown hair was messy, his face tired, and his eyes were closed. I pulled a chair beside him and sat down. That was all I planned to do. Sit there until he woke up. At some point, exhaustion won. When I opened my eyes again, pale morning light was coming through the blinds, and Ryan was watching me. "You actually came," he murmured. His voice was rough with sleep. I straightened. "Of course I came. You're my best friend." Something changed in his expression so quickly I almost missed it. "Yeah," he said. "Best friend." A nurse entered a few minutes later to check on him. While adjusting his chart, she smiled at me. "You got here fast." "He didn't give me much choice." Ryan rolled his eyes. "Ignore him," the nurse laughed. "Well, you must be important. The paramedics said when they asked Mr. Parker who they should contact. He gave them your name immediately." I looked at Ryan. He suddenly became very interested in the blanket covering his legs. "Your parents weren't first?" I asked. "They live 1,200 miles away." "That's not what I asked." Ryan finally met my eyes. For once, there was no joke waiting behind them. "I knew you'd come." 4 simple words. That was all. But sitting beside his hospital bed, with morning light stretching across the floor between us, I felt something shift quietly inside me. I didn't have a name for it yet. All I knew was that when Ryan had been frightened and hurting, surrounded by strangers in the middle of the night, he hadn't asked for his parents. He hadn't asked for anyone else. He had asked for me. Ryan stayed through the following afternoon while the doctors monitored his concussion, and by the time he was cleared to leave, I had somehow become the person responsible for remembering everything he was supposed to do. I had a printed schedule for his medication folded inside my jacket pocket, the phone number for his physical therapist saved in my contacts, and a list of instructions that Ryan had barely listened to because he was too busy complaining about the hospital coffee. The discharge plan allowed him to put weight on the boot as pain permitted, using forearm crutches until his balance and shoulder improved. "It tastes like somebody described coffee to a cup of hot water," he said while I helped gather his things. "You drank 3 cups yesterday." I was desperate. That was Ryan. Give him one good joke and he could pretend almost anything was normal. The problem was that I knew him too well. I noticed the way his smile disappeared whenever he thought I was not looking. I noticed how much effort it took for him to stand in the walking boot and settle his forearms into the crutches. Most of all, I noticed how much he hated needing help. His apartment was on the 2nd floor of an older building with an elevator that worked most days, which suddenly felt like an important detail. When we arrived, I carried his bag while Ryan insisted on managing the 15 feet from the elevator to his door without assistance. It took nearly 5 minutes. "You know," I said, unlocking the door, "accepting help does not legally make you less masculine. I will remember that when I need your opinion. You always need my opinion. It improves your life." He laughed, and for a moment everything felt familiar again. Then he tried to reach for a glass in the kitchen cabinet and stopped when his shoulder protested. I took it down without saying anything. Ryan stared at the glass in my hand. "This is going to be terrible." "For you or me?" "Yes." His parents wanted to fly in from Colorado, but Ryan convinced them not to. His mother had recently undergone knee surgery, and he refused to let his father leave her alone. That left me. I told Ryan I would stay for a few days. He argued. I said a week. He argued harder. By that evening, I had moved a duffel bag, my laptop, 3 clean shirts, and an unreasonable amount of takeout into his apartment. 4 weeks, I told him after reading the recovery instructions again. The orthopedist expects you to be mostly independent by then if the follow-up scan and therapy stay on track. Ryan looked horrified. "You are staying here for a month?" Try sounding less grateful. "Ethan, seriously. You have work. You have your own apartment. You have a life." "I can work remotely." That was not the important part of that sentence. I looked at him. "I know." Something about my answer made him quiet. The first week settled into a strange rhythm. I worked from his dining table while Ryan rested on the couch. I burned grilled cheese so badly that he opened every window despite it being 38 degrees outside. He accused me of trying to finish what the bicycle had started. I told him he was welcome to cook for himself. He pointed dramatically at his crutches. At night, I set alarms so he would not miss anything on his medication schedule. In the mornings, I made coffee before he woke up. Black for me, 2 sugars and a little cream for him. I had known his order for years. I had simply never thought about what it meant to know someone through 1,000 tiny details. One afternoon, I found him standing in the kitchen trying to carry a bowl while balancing awkwardly on his crutches. "Ryan." He froze like a kid caught stealing cookies. "I had a system." "Your system was terrible." I took the bowl from him and set it on the counter. His frustration surfaced immediately. "I cannot even carry my own lunch. For now. I hate this." The joke was gone from his voice. I waited. Ryan looked toward the window. "I hate needing somebody for everything." I could have teased him. Normally I would have. Instead, I said, then need me for a while. He looked at me. You do not have to keep doing all this. I leaned against the counter. I know. That silence returned, the same strange silence from the hospital. Ryan studied my face as though I had said something much bigger than 4 words. Maybe I had. I just did not understand it yet. By the second week, I had learned that taking care of Ryan was less about doing big things and more about noticing the small ones before he had to ask. I knew when his shoulder was bothering him because he became unusually quiet. I knew when his leg was tired because he shifted his weight and pretended he was only adjusting his crutches. I knew when he was frustrated because the left corner of his mouth tightened, exactly the way it always had whenever he tried to convince me he was fine. None of this should have surprised me. We had been best friends for 8 years. I had seen Ryan exhausted after finals, furious after losing jobs, embarrassed after terrible dates, and once so sick with the flu that he called me at 6 in the morning because he could not remember whether orange juice counted as breakfast. But this was different. There was nowhere for either of us to disappear. I worked at his dining table. He rested 10 feet away. We ate every meal together. Every ordinary part of the day suddenly belonged to both of us. One morning, I was answering emails when I heard him struggling in his bedroom. Everything okay? I called. Perfect. That meant absolutely not. I found him trying to pull a sweatshirt over his injured shoulder with one hand. I can do it, he said, clearly. Give me 30 seconds. You have already had 5 minutes. Ryan gave me an offended look, but finally lowered his arm. I helped guide the sleeve carefully over his shoulder, then straightened the fabric near his collar. It was nothing. A practical thing between 2 friends. Except when I looked up, his face was closer than I expected. His brown eyes met mine, and neither of us spoke. I became strangely aware of my hand still resting near his shoulder. Ryan swallowed. Thanks, he said softly. Yeah. I stepped back too quickly. For the rest of the morning, I blamed the strange feeling in my chest on too much coffee. That explanation became harder to believe as the days passed. Ryan started waiting for me to finish work before choosing a movie, even though he had the entire day to watch whatever he wanted. He saved the last cinnamon roll because he knew it was my favorite. When I had a difficult call with a client, he silently slid a fresh cup of coffee beside my laptop without interrupting. I had spent days thinking about everything I was doing for him. I had not noticed how often he was taking care of me, too. Then one night, I woke to the sound of movement from his room. The clock read 2:46 in the morning. I found Ryan sitting on the edge of his bed, staring at the floor. Could not sleep? I asked. I am fine. His mouth tightened. I sat beside him, leaving a little space between us. Try again. He exhaled slowly. My leg is aching. It is not terrible, just enough to keep me awake. Do you need anything? No. We sat quietly for a while. Finally, Ryan said, I hate that you have to see me like this. I turned toward him. Like what? Needing help. Complaining about stupid things. Taking forever just to get across a room. His voice dropped. I do not feel like myself. I thought about the Ryan everyone else knew. Confident, funny, independent, always the first person offering help and the last person admitting he needed any. Maybe this is yourself too, I said. He looked at me. That is supposed to make me feel better? I mean, maybe being strong does not require pretending nothing hurts. His expression softened. When did you get wise? Around 2:30 this morning. He laughed quietly, and the tension left his face. Our shoulders rested lightly against each other. Neither of us moved away. A few minutes later, Ryan closed his eyes, exhausted, and his head settled against my shoulder. I stayed completely still. I told myself it was because he finally looked peaceful. I told myself moving would wake him. Both things were true. They just were not the whole truth anymore. The next morning, neither of us mentioned that Ryan had fallen asleep against my shoulder. He woke sometime before sunrise, muttered something about his neck hurting from sitting upright, and disappeared beneath his blankets while I returned to the couch. By breakfast, we were back to arguing about whether scrambled eggs needed hot sauce, and I was grateful for the normalcy. Still, something had changed. I noticed it during the quiet moments, especially when Ryan looked at me a second longer than necessary, and I found myself doing the same. 3 days later, I drove him to physical therapy for his first serious mobility session. The clinic was about 6 miles from his apartment, and Ryan spent the entire ride pretending he was not nervous. "You know they are not grading you," I said. "I know." "There is no trophy." "I know." "No scouts from professional sports teams waiting in the lobby." Ryan looked over at me. "Do you ever get tired of hearing yourself talk?" "Not once in 27 years. That earned the smile I wanted. Inside the clinic, his physical therapist, Melissa, guided him through a series of careful exercises designed to rebuild strength and confidence. I sat near the wall with my laptop open, supposedly working. I answered exactly 2 emails in 40 minutes because I kept looking up. Every small movement seemed to require Ryan's full concentration. He never complained. That was almost worse. I could see frustration gathering behind his eyes whenever his body refused to cooperate as quickly as his mind wanted it to. When the session ended, Melissa told him he had done well. Ryan nodded as if she had merely confirmed the weather. In the parking lot, he stopped beside my car. "That was awful. You did great." I moved about 12 feet. 13, maybe. I was impressed. He gave me a tired smile. "You are ridiculous. And yet you called me from the hospital." His expression changed at that, softer now. "Yeah, I did." After that, physical therapy became part of our routine. Tuesday and Thursday mornings, I drove. Ryan complained about my music. I bought him coffee afterward. Each week, the distances became a little longer. His movements became steadier. One afternoon, he made it from the therapy room to the front desk with less assistance than before. He turned toward me with an expression of surprised triumph, and I felt ridiculously proud. "Did you see that?" he asked. "Unfortunately. Now your ego is going to be unbearable. You're just jealous of my athletic ability. You are moving slower than a shopping cart with one bad wheel." He laughed so loudly that Melissa glanced over from across the room. On the drive home, Ryan was quieter. "Thank you," he said eventually. "For what?" "For making this feel less terrible." I kept my eyes on the road. "That is what friends do." The words sounded strangely rehearsed now. That evening, I had a difficult video call with a client who rejected 3 weeks of design work in under 10 minutes. Afterward, I closed my laptop harder than necessary and stared at the dining table. Without saying anything, Ryan made his careful way into the kitchen. A few minutes later, he returned carrying 2 mugs, one at a time, because he still could not safely manage both. He placed mine beside me. Black coffee. Exactly right. "I thought I was supposed to be taking care of you," I said. "Maybe we can take turns." I looked at him, and something warm settled in my chest. Later that night, we sat on opposite ends of the couch, watching an old comedy we had already seen at least 5 times. Halfway through, Ryan fell asleep. His head tilted toward me, and I reached for the blanket folded beside my leg. I covered him carefully, then lowered the television volume. For years, Ryan had simply been Ryan, the person I called without thinking, the person who knew every embarrassing version of me and stayed anyway. Now I was noticing the shape of his smile when he was genuinely happy, the quiet kindness behind his jokes, the way my apartment no longer crossed my mind when I thought about going home. I told myself proximity was making everything feel more significant than it was. I told myself that once Ryan recovered, our lives would return to normal. Then he shifted in his sleep and murmured my name. And for reasons I could not explain, the thought of normal suddenly felt less comforting than it should have. By the third week, Ryan had started measuring his days in distances instead of hours. 10 feet without stopping became 20. 20 became a slow trip across the therapy room. Every improvement was small enough that anyone else might have missed it, but I noticed all of them. On Thursday morning, after checking the orthopedist's weight-bearing instructions, Melissa positioned Ryan near one end of the padded practice area and asked him to try several steps in the boot with minimal support. I stood about 8 feet away, pretending to be calm while Ryan stared at the floor like it had personally challenged him. "You look terrified," I said. He glanced up. "I am deciding whether falling in front of you would be worse than listening to you talk about it for the next 20 years. "Definitely the second one." Melissa smiled and told him to focus. Ryan adjusted his balance, took a breath, and moved forward. The first step was careful, the second was steadier. By the fourth, his expression had changed from concentration to disbelief. "Ethan!" "I see you." Another step, then another. I forgot about my laptop, the other patients, and everything except the look on his face. When he reached me, I reacted without thinking. I wrapped my arms around him. Ryan laughed against my shoulder, one hand gripping the back of my sweatshirt. "I did it." "You did?" "I actually did it." "I know. I should have released him then." Instead, we stayed there for one extra heartbeat, then another. Ryan's laughter faded. When I finally pulled back, his hands remained lightly on my arms. Our eyes met. The room seemed strangely quiet, even though nothing around us had changed. "Nice work," Melissa called from behind him. The moment broke. Ryan stepped back, smiling, and I shoved my hands into my pockets because I suddenly did not know what else to do with them. We celebrated with burgers from his favorite place, the kind served in paper-lined baskets with enough fries for 3 people. Ryan was happier than I had seen him since the accident. I wanted to be happy too. I was happy. At least I thought I was, until his follow-up appointment that afternoon. The doctor reviewed his progress and told him his recovery was moving faster than expected. If things continued this way, Ryan would soon be able to manage most daily tasks without me. "That is great news," I said immediately. Ryan grinned. "You hear that? You are almost free." "Finally. I was starting to think you planned this entire thing for free housekeeping." He laughed, but something inside me dropped. On the drive home, Ryan talked about returning to work, driving again when he was cleared, and finally getting his independence back. I nodded at the right moments. Every milestone he mentioned was something I had wanted for him from the beginning. So why did each one sound like a countdown? That evening, Ryan insisted on making dinner. He moved carefully around the kitchen while I sat at the counter, fighting the instinct to stand every time he reached for something. "Stop watching me," he said. "I am not watching you. You have been staring for 5 minutes. I am supervising." Your services are becoming unnecessary, Miller. He smiled when he said it. I smiled back. Later, he carried his own plate to the sink. He got himself ready for bed without calling for help. For the first time since I had moved in, there was nothing he needed from me. I lay awake on the couch listening to the apartment settle into silence. I should have felt relieved. Instead, I remembered him crossing those 8 feet toward me that morning. I remembered how naturally my arms had gone around him, and how neither of us had wanted to move first. I had spent weeks telling myself that I was here because Ryan needed me. That night, an uncomfortable possibility finally became impossible to ignore. Maybe I had gotten it backward. Maybe somewhere between making his coffee, driving him to therapy, and learning the difference between his real smile and the one he used when he was hurting, I had become the one who needed something. The realization frightened me enough that the next morning, before Ryan woke up, I packed my laptop and went to work from my own apartment for the first time in 3 weeks. Working from my own apartment should have felt normal. It was where I had worked before Ryan got hurt, where my desk faced the same window and my coffee maker made the same terrible noise every morning. Instead, everything felt slightly wrong. By 10 o'clock, I had checked my phone 6 times. Ryan had not called. Of course he had not. He was getting better. That was the entire point. Around noon, a message finally appeared. Ryan asked if I was coming back for dinner. I stared at it longer than necessary before telling him I had a deadline and would probably work late. He replied with a simple, "Okay." I hated how disappointed that one word made me feel. Over the next several days, I became very good at inventing reasonable excuses. I had client revisions. I needed clean clothes. My refrigerator contained food that would expire. All of those things were true, which made them convenient. I still drove Ryan to physical therapy, but I stopped waiting inside. I answered emails in the car instead. I stopped sitting beside him during movies. I stopped reaching automatically when he stood. Every time I created another inch of distance, I told myself I was helping both of us return to normal. Ryan noticed before I was ready to admit there was anything to notice. On Tuesday, I arrived at his apartment carrying takeout and found him standing in the kitchen without his crutches, one hand resting lightly on the counter for balance. "Look at you," I said. "Almost independent." He smiled, but it disappeared quickly. Apparently. We ate at the dining table. Usually Ryan filled silence without effort, but that night he barely spoke. Finally, he set down his fork. "Did I do something?" My stomach tightened. "What?" "Something wrong." "No." "Then why are you acting weird?" "I am not." The left corner of his mouth tightened. For once, I wondered if he had learned to read me as easily as I read him. "You stopped working here," he said. "You leave right after therapy. Yesterday you dropped off groceries like you were delivering a package. You are doing better. You do not need me hovering around anymore." "I never asked you to hover." "That is not what I meant." Ryan leaned back, studying me. "Then what did you mean?" I had no answer I could safely give him. The truth was sitting between us, enormous and unnamed. I was afraid of staying because staying had started to mean too much. I was afraid of leaving because leaving already hurt. "I just thought you would want your space back," I said. Ryan looked down at his plate. "Right." His voice was quiet. "My space." I wanted to fix it, but every sentence forming in my head sounded dangerously close to a confession I did not understand myself. 2 days later, physical therapy went better than ever. Ryan walked nearly 30 feet with minimal assistance. Melissa told him that if his progress continued, he would soon be ready to transition into a more independent routine. In the parking lot, Ryan should have been celebrating. Instead, he stood beside my car and looked at me. "You know what is strange?" he asked. "What?" "3 weeks ago, I could barely cross my apartment without you, and somehow you felt closer than anybody in my life." I said nothing. Ryan continued, "Now I am getting better every day, and it feels like I am losing you." The words landed harder than I expected. "You are not losing me." "Then where are you going?" "Nowhere." "Ethan, you barely look at me anymore." I finally met his eyes. There was no anger there. That would have been easier. He simply looked hurt. "Did I make you uncomfortable?" he asked. "No." "Did I ask too much from you?" "Never." "Then tell me what changed." I wanted to. For one reckless second, I almost told him everything. I almost said that I had started measuring my mornings by whether he smiled when I handed him coffee. That seeing him walk toward me had made me happier than anything in months. That I was terrified our friendship had quietly become something I could no longer fit back into its old shape. Instead, I opened the passenger door. Nothing changed. Ryan looked at me for a long moment before getting into the car. We both knew I was lying. 3 days after that conversation, Ryan was cleared to manage most of his routine on his own. The fracture was still healing. Melissa still wanted him at physical therapy twice a week, and he was not ready to drive or return to biking. But he could move around his apartment safely in the boot, prepare meals, shower without assistance, and handle the ordinary things that had seemed impossible a month earlier. It was exactly what we had been working toward. I should have been relieved. Instead, on Saturday morning, I stood in his living room folding the blanket I had slept under for nearly 4 weeks and felt like I was packing away something I had not understood until it was ending. My duffel bag sat open on the couch. There was not much to collect. A few shirts, my laptop charger, running shoes, a toothbrush, and the sweatshirt Ryan had borrowed twice because he claimed his apartment was always cold. He stood near the kitchen counter watching me. "You know you do not have to evacuate the building before noon," he said. "I am not evacuating." "You packed your toothbrush before breakfast." "Efficient planning." "Suspicious behavior." I smiled, but neither of us laughed. Ryan was moving well now. He still walked carefully, but every step looked more like the person I remembered from before the accident. I should have looked at him and seen success. Instead, I saw proof that my excuse for staying was gone. "So this is it," Ryan said. "What is it?" "The end of your glamorous nursing career. You were a terrible patient. You burned grilled cheese. Once. Twice. The second one was aggressively toasted." That finally made him laugh. I zipped my bag and lifted it from the couch. Ryan's smile faded. For a second, I thought he might say something about the conversation in the parking lot. I almost hoped he would. Instead, he nodded toward the door. "I guess I will see you Tuesday. Physical therapy at 9. I remember. I know." There it was again. That strange space where ordinary words seemed to carry something neither of us was brave enough to name. I left before I could change my mind. My apartment greeted me exactly as I had left it. The mail was stacked on the counter. A coffee mug sat beside the sink. My desk chair still had a jacket hanging over the back. Everything was familiar, but the silence felt enormous. The next morning, I made coffee and automatically reached for a second mug. I stood there staring at it before putting it back. At lunch, I almost ordered Ryan's favorite sandwich. That evening, I heard a television through the wall from the apartment next door and instinctively looked toward the couch, expecting him to make some sarcastic comment about whatever we were watching. He was not there. I had thought I would miss being useful. I was wrong. I missed him stealing fries from my plate. I missed his terrible morning hair. I missed the way he said my name when he wanted something, and the different way he said it when he was worried about me. I missed knowing that at the end of the day, he would be 10 feet away. Ryan later told me that across town, he had been discovering his own version of the same silence. He had found one of my old gray blankets folded behind the couch cushion, the one I always pulled over myself during late movies. He had picked it up, stared at it, then sat down with it beside him. My phone lit up just after 10 that night. Ryan's name appeared on the screen, then disappeared before the call connected. A second later, 3 dots appeared in our message thread. They vanished. I typed, "Are you okay?" Then deleted it. I typed, "Did you need something?" That sounded worse. I erased that too. For several minutes, neither of us sent anything. I finally set the phone face down and leaned back against the couch. That was when the truth became painfully simple. I did not miss taking care of Ryan. I missed waking up knowing he was part of my day. I missed the ordinary life we had accidentally built together. And if I was this afraid of losing him now, then whatever I felt had stopped being ordinary friendship a long time ago. Ryan showed up at my apartment 2 evenings later, carrying the gray blanket I had left behind and wearing the expression he usually reserved for conversations he had rehearsed too many times. When I opened the door, neither of us spoke for several seconds. "You forgot this," he finally said, holding up the blanket. I looked at it. "You came across town for a blanket?" "Apparently." "Ryan, can I come in?" I stepped aside. He walked to the couch and placed the blanket carefully over the armrest, then remained standing. His recovery had progressed enough that he no longer needed crutches indoors, though the walking boot and slight caution in his steps remained. I hated that my first instinct was to ask whether he was tired. I hated even more that I stopped myself. Ryan noticed. Of course he did. "There," he said quietly. "That. You almost asked if I was okay." "You are okay." "That is not the point." I closed the door. "Then what is the point?" Ryan turned toward me. "I thought getting better meant getting my life back. I thought I wanted everything exactly the way it was before." He paused. "I did not know getting my old life back meant losing the part of my new one I wanted to keep." My chest tightened. "Ryan, no. You got to avoid this conversation for almost a week. Now I get 5 minutes." Despite everything, I nearly smiled. 5 minutes? Maybe 10. I prepared notes mentally. That was so completely Ryan that the tension cracked for half a second. Then his expression softened. "You said nothing changed. We both know that was not true." I looked away. I was trying not to ruin anything. By disappearing? By giving us a chance to go back to normal. Did you want normal back? That question left nowhere to hide. I thought about the second coffee mug, the empty couch, the silent mornings. I thought about watching him take those first careful steps toward me and feeling happier than I had any right to feel. "No," I said. Ryan became very still. I forced myself to continue. "Taking care of you stopped feeling like something I was doing because you were my best friend. Somewhere between the hospital, the burned grilled cheese, those drives to therapy, and watching you learn how to trust yourself again, something changed for me." My voice grew quieter. "I fell in love with you, Ryan." The words were terrifying for exactly 1 second. Then they were simply true. I did not say anything because you were recovering. You depended on me. I never wanted you to feel like my help came with expectations. Ryan stared at me, his eyes bright with an emotion I could not read. You really are an idiot. I blinked. That was not the response I expected. Do you remember what the nurse told you that first morning? About you asking them to call me? Ryan nodded. I remember almost nothing clearly from that night. I remember being scared. I remember strangers asking questions. Then somebody asked who they should call. He stepped closer. I did not think about my parents. I did not think about anybody else. I said your name. My heart started beating faster. Why? Ryan gave a small, almost nervous smile. That is what I have been trying to figure out for the last month. Then you left, and this apartment-sized hole opened in my life. He shook his head. I think some part of me knew before the rest of me did. Knew what? That you were already home to me. Neither of us moved for a moment. 8 years of friendship seemed to stand between us, not as a barrier, but as a bridge we had somehow been building without realizing it. Ryan reached for my hand. If this changes things, he said, maybe that is not automatically bad. I squeezed his fingers. You prepared that line too? No, that one was free. I laughed and Ryan did too. Ryan's smile turned nervous. Can I kiss you? He asked. Yes, I said, and met him halfway. Our first kiss was brief, gentle, and almost shy. Nothing like the dramatic moment I might once have imagined falling in love would require. When we pulled apart, Ryan rested his forehead lightly against mine and smiled. For the record, your grilled cheese was still terrible. I laughed again, and just like that, the scariest conversation of my life somehow felt like coming home. 1 year later, I stood beneath a bright October sky, watching Ryan stretch beside the starting line of a charity 5-kilometer run, and I could hardly connect the man bouncing impatiently on his feet with the one who had once celebrated crossing 8 feet of a physical therapy room. You are staring, Ryan said. I am supervising. He looked at me and laughed. You have been using that excuse for a year, and it continues to work. The event raised money for the rehabilitation center, where Ryan had spent months rebuilding his strength. Melissa was somewhere near the registration tent, proudly telling anyone who would listen that Ryan had once been her most stubborn patient. Ryan claimed that was medically inaccurate. I knew better. His recovery had not happened all at once. There had been more therapy appointments, cautious walks around the block, frustrating mornings, and small victories that gradually stopped feeling small. I stayed beside him through all of it, but after that night in my apartment, something fundamental had changed. I was no longer staying because Ryan needed help. I stayed because we had finally admitted that we wanted each other in our lives in a different way. Dating my best friend turned out to be surprisingly ordinary. We still argued about movies. He still stole fries from my plate. I still made coffee every morning, except now there were always 2 mugs on the counter. We did not become different people when we fell in love. We simply stopped pretending that the life we had accidentally built together meant less than it did. The starting signal sounded, and we moved with the crowd. Ryan had promised to take it easy. Naturally, within the first half mile, he was several steps ahead of me. Taking it easy? I called. He turned while jogging backward for 2 seconds. I am barely moving. I remember when 12 feet impressed you. Ancient history, Miller. We finished side by side. Ryan crossed the line laughing, breathing hard but looking happier than I had ever seen him. I remembered the hospital, the crutches, the silence after physical therapy, and that first morning when 4 words from him had changed something inside me before I understood what was happening. Ryan reached for my hand. "You okay?" he asked. "I was supposed to ask you that. You looked emotional." I was thinking. Dangerous. I bumped my shoulder lightly against his. "I was thinking about how far you came." His teasing expression softened. "We came." Before I could answer, a volunteer approached with 2 bottles of water. She handed one to Ryan, then looked between us. "You two brothers?" Ryan nearly choked, laughing. "Definitely not." The volunteer looked embarrassed. "Sorry. Family?" The question stopped me. For 1 second, I was back beneath fluorescent hospital lights at 1:17 in the morning, exhausted and frightened, standing at a desk while a nurse asked me the same thing. Back then, I had hesitated because I thought family was a category with strict rules. Parents, siblings, people connected by blood or paperwork. I had answered no, then explained that Ryan was my best friend, as though those words somehow made him less important. Now Ryan stood beside me, his fingers still threaded through mine. I looked at him. He knew exactly what I was remembering. His smile became quiet and warm. "Yeah," I told the volunteer. "We are." She smiled, handed me the second bottle, and walked away. Ryan squeezed my hand. "That was smooth." "Thank you." "You practiced it?" "For approximately 1 year." He laughed and leaned closer, pressing a quick, gentle kiss to my cheek before we started walking toward the parking lot. I used to think love would arrive like some enormous event, obvious enough that I could never mistake it for anything else. Instead, mine had been there quietly for years. It was late-night phone calls and remembered coffee orders. It was terrible grilled cheese and waiting rooms. It was knowing someone's real smile from the one they used when they were hurting. Ryan getting better had taught me something I had been too afraid to understand while he still needed me. Love was never about being necessary. It was about being chosen when necessity disappeared. A year earlier, when Ryan was scared and someone asked who they should call, he chose me. Now, walking beside him with his hand in mine, I understood that I had been choosing him for years too. I had simply needed life to make me notice.